Let's explore the necessity or the positivity of negativity. The first necessity, the first role that negativity plays in the landscape of polarity is it completes the circle. All reality starts with the one. The one is divided through language and subsequently thought. All thoughts are composed in language into these two halves. Whenever you divide the one in a polarity, you get two equal halves. And you create an illusion. In order to restore the one, to restore the whole, you have to have both halves, right? So, to complete the whole, we need negativity as the counterpoint to positivity. The other reason we need negativity is to generate the possibility field, the probability field, and actuality. So actuality is resting on the foundation of probability, and probability is resting on the foundation of possibility. And it is impossible to generate a positive possibility field without a negative possibility field. First of all, the language in and of itself doesn't make any sense. As soon as there's positivity, you need the counterpoint, just as a concept, as a definition. But you can also see this geometrically, that if you have a range, let's say a 1 mile range of sight, and you call this the positive area. Well, a 1 mile range of sight creates a possibility field that is this big. And having divided the world into two, into polarity, on the opposite side of whatever you call positive is negative. And you have a similar 1 mile view out into negative territory, right? And, in a more practical sense, if you decide that you want to have eyes or if you want to have a nose, just by opening up that possibility of smelling, you can smell lavender, you can smell rose, but you can also smell shit. You can also smell burnt toast, right? So the possibility field is always equal in all directions. And so whatever one person calls negative, which can be the opposite for another person, one includes the other. We need negativity to make positivity possible. You can also look at the threads of a possibility field that, in a very real way, the possibility field is a series of threads where one thing is next to the other, right? It's a fabric of possibility. And if nothing negative was possible, like you think of money, and you think of it being, for example, a freedom. Well, that freedom includes the ability to hire a hitman. It includes the ability to hire a hit woman. It includes the ability to turn oneself into, a spoiled, narcissistic person. And it also includes, in order to include the freedom, right, of also doing something great. Because what's the significance? Negativity provides the significance of life, of that choice. Negativity is the foundation of all significance, right? Because if the only possibility was to use our money to help the elderly, then helping the elderly has no significance. There's no other choice. But if you could fritter it away gambling, if you could use it to become a lazy jerk, but instead you use it to do something uncommon that helps other people, for example, the significance comes because you had other options. And what tells you that you have other options is the probability field in which you exist, right? So we're all existing in a bell curve of probability, right? There are some things that there's only 1 or 2% of the people are in that category, right? Certainly the 1% are only in the 1%. The 1% most generous people. What makes that significant is the 99% that are less generous. There's no significance, right? Because it's all relative on a bell curve. It's all relative. It's saying this is average, this is below average, this is way below average, or this is average, this is above average, this is the very pinnacle above average. And 1 billion years from now, that will change, but it will always be referenced to the norm, to the majority. So we make the possibility field possible with negativity. We also complete the possibility field. We give it significance. Where we are on that possibility field has significance because of contrast. But the other thing is life is bigger. If you come back to the 1, right? And before the 1 is divided into 2, if you come back to the 1, you divide it into 2, and then you keep only the plus, only the positive, and you delete the negative. You've just lost half of life. So reality is 50% smaller without negativity. The other reason we need negativity is to motivate change. Why do most people do most things? In part, out of fear of pain and to avoid pain, which is another way of saying fear of pain. Fear of pain is it is an enormous motivator of constructive change. Why don't I run up all my credit cards and buy junk or, some cocaine? Why don't I rack up credit card debt and buy cocaine? Because, in part, I'm afraid of the pain that I will experience when I run out of money, when my things are repossessed. That's one. In part, I'm afraid of the distrust, of the pain of distrust, of people around me looking at me and saying, completely untrustworthy, and having a distance. So, right? I'm afraid of the pain of having to pay all that interest back, right? Being more confined. So, fear of pain is only meaningful, is only relevant, only exists if there is pain. And on the continuum of feeling great or feeling pain, pain is negativity, right? So we do things for a mix of reasons, but half of the reason is the fear of pain. I don't want to feel bad, so I'm not going to drink as much today because I don't want to feel bad in the morning. But if you couldn't feel bad in the morning, right, that choice lacks significance. But also you don't improve. If pain wasn't there, if you felt great being an idiot, if you felt great being weak, if you felt great knowing nothing, if you felt great being profoundly incompetent, and some people do, you will not motivate yourself to constructively evolve, to change. And so negativity is the fountain out of which most constructive change emerges, because we don't want to feel that negativity again. Now, that positive change leads to evolution, right? When we don't want to experience another war, we have to develop skills that we didn't have. We have to grow. Otherwise, we experience another war. And this is, of course, the cycle of forgetfulness, right? Wars often do not happen in the same generation because the people who have experienced poverty, death, disease, terror, trauma, they're not all excited, let's go to war about some idiotic dogma. But it develops a little bit of romance with a few generations of separation. So the next generation that hasn't experienced a war may go to war because being righteous has an allure, but you haven't experienced pain. And so the desire not to die, which is in many ways the ultimate sense of pain from an ego's perspective, the desire not to die, challenges us constantly to competitively compete, to evolve our ideas, to evolve our strategies, to evolve our protocols. We are motivated to change when the pain that results from our past action is too uncomfortable to sustain. Now, the other thing that can happen, right, because there's two passes with pain and negativity, and you can think of this also as limitation. If I don't have any money, and I can't make any money, and I don't know how to make any money, and I want things, there's a frustration, there's a pain there, and I'm stuck, right? Well, that level of pain does not bring empathy. Being stuck and limited in a certain situation that we cannot escape does not build empathy. It builds frustration, it builds sometimes creativity, and the desire and the motivation to get out and to get better. But there's a second encounter with the same territory that creates empathy. And that's once we've gotten unstuck. In other words, when we penny pinched and saved saved everything, and then we lost it, and then this happened, and that happened, and finally we could buy a house. And then the market went up, and we could get a loan back, and then interest rates came down, and we could, this is wonderful, right? The pain disappears, right? We can make the payment, we've got extra money, we've got security, we've got an appreciating asset, it feels great, right? So now there's no longer frustration, there's no longer creativity in trying to solve that particular problem. That is another benefit of negativity. Everything that is a problem has pain associated with it. Otherwise, it's no problem, right? So the primary motivator to solve problems is negativity. And we grow our technology grows as we solve problems. But let's go back to this thing of empathy. If you have never pinched pennies and never tried to achieve a big goal, and you see someone else stressing and pinching pennies and trying to buy a house, you just, oh, that's interesting, right? But if before there was a time when you were stuck, and now you are not stuck, watching someone else go through what you went through produces empathy, profound empathy. A tremendous amount of empathy, of compassion, is created when you experienced an intense pain, when you freed yourself from that pain and are now no longer in pain. Now, when you see someone else in that same pain, you feel empathy, you feel compassion. Now think of that. If you had not experienced the pain and had not been stuck for a while in the pain, and if you had not solved the problems producing the pain and transcended the pain, then you would no longer have empathy and understanding and responsiveness to other people who were in pain. And a world without empathy, without compassion, is a much smaller world. Finally, if you think about becoming, if you think about growth in consciousness, or growth in evolution, growth is about, as we experience it, we have the all, we have all that is, and then we have a very, 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 very tiny thing that is us. Now, our knowledge grows. In order to grow our knowledge, we have to see positivity and negativity. Our awareness with our knowledge grows. Again, we have to be aware of positivity and negativity, or our knowledge and our awareness is diminished. But also our skill grows. Think of taking up running and running around. Well, odds are we're going to see a bigger area, including areas we like and we don't like. If we meet more people, grow our sphere of social connections. Either some of the people we meet or some of the relatives or friends of the people we meet will be in the category we consider negative. But if we do not meet, the only way to cut that out is not to meet more people, right? It's just to meet maybe one or two positive people and then not meet any of their friends. So in whatever way that we're growing, it will encompass, in order to grow, it will encompass what is called negativity. And so, if you think of the evolution of God, or God, Goddess, all that is also growing. God, Goddess, all that is not stagnant and becoming outdated. Life, the universe, is growing. And as it grows, its possibility expands. And as its possibility expands, it expands positively and negatively. Right? The more planets there are in the universe, the more likely at any given year that one of them goes supernova, which you could call negative if you identify with that planet. Right? If our planet went supernova or collided with an asteroid or whatever, we would consider that negative, right? But the more things there are, the bigger life is, the more likely it is that something, somewhere, is going on at any given point in time. In order for life to grow, in order for us to grow, we must encounter, we must include, we must open up to, at the very least, the awareness of, but also eventually the identification with what is positive and negative, right? You think of what, currently is being called shadow work. Oh, what's shadow work? Well, that's the repressed, denied parts that are remainders after cultural dictatorship. Right? The cult dictates protocols that are and are not acceptable. You get lynched if you don't conform to this. You get stoned to death if you don't conform to this. You don't get any money if you don't conform to this. Maybe it's the race, maybe it's the religion, maybe it's some dogma, maybe it's appearance. Every cult has its framework that creates a hierarchy of rank within that framework, right? And if you are very low ranking in any cult, if you're a low-ranking minority, and most minorities are low-ranking minorities, there are a few high-ranking minorities, but the majority of minorities are low-ranking because the law of mass creates a power differential, that when a large group collides with a small group, the small group is sent flying most of the time, always in physics, right? Now, if you have a 1% of the wealthiest people, right? You have in a capitalist framework, meaning in a framework where most people will do most things if there's enough money involved, then even though it's a 1% minority, maybe 70% of people will be swayed with the gravitational pull of attachment to that money, to that symbol of value, and so they're actually not a minority. They've got 70% of the population working for them at a drop of a hat to visit. So they actually are the biggest because they've got the biggest pool of energy stored as money. But real minorities who don't have a majority of resources are generally treated worse. And in order to expand, right, in order to know more of ourselves, we must change our protocol of suppression, denying, beating up, and shaming the shadow within, the negative, as we call it. And we must embrace it and find constructive ways to bring the shadow out, to funnel aggression in creative ways, to funnel lust in constructive ways that generate more than if we just suppress it. Right? Similarly, if you suppress 1% of the population in prison at any given point, an accomplishment of the United States, if you spend vast amounts of energy locking up and suppressing 1% of the population rather than as the shadow, right, the outlaw, the one outside the line, well, rather than channeling that 1% to do tremendous feats, right? If rather than punishing and pain, you direct that shadow of energy towards something meaningful, right? You gain more, right? And finally, you come to God, Goddess, all that is. And the definition of God, Goddess, all that is, which we'll call God as shorthand, is always changing, but it always represents the pinnacle of possibility, right? God represents the whole, represents the one, the most powerful, all-powerful, for example, all-knowing. Well, you cannot be all-powerful and stay in this side of the possibility field. That's not all-powerful. In fact, you're quite weak if you are pitted against an equal rival and spend all your time at war. That's not power, that's stupidity, right? In order to move towards God got us all that is, in other words, we have to move in a direction not of polarization and stalemate. You can think of one of the stupidest expressions of energy on the planet being the tug of war. Let's divide a group of people in half, and then this half will pull this way, and this half will pull this way, and absolutely nothing will get done. And then we'll just know who's stronger that day, right? And then you do it again the next day. There are a few things that are as stupid as a tug of war. And that's what a well-matched battle really is, a tug of war, right? Let's spend all of our energy not creating schools, not creating organic gardens, not creating peak experiences or art. No. Let's spend all our energy creating things to hurt you. And then you spend all your energy, and then 90% of us will die in the battle, right? In a well-matched battle of positive and negativity, good and evil, right? They're two equal sides. I mean, one has to believe in a pretty dumb concept of deity to think that that's the best game they could come up with, right? So in order to become one with everything, in order to become all powerful, not half powerful, you actually need to create a partnership, which is what this video is about, right? It's acknowledging that negativity is not the enemy, that the enemy is refusing to grow, that when a problem presents itself, we run away from the problem and the problem gets bigger, right? Refusing to grow is the enemy of growth, which is the enemy of life, which is the enemy of God got us all that is, right? Because God got us all that is the synergy, is the totality of all that is. And when we look at something and say, oh, that bit of God isn't for me, we turn away from the whole. And when we look at something else and say, oh, I hate that person, we turn away from the whole. We don't like that person, we don't like this, right? So when we turn away from growth, we stay small, we stay frail. When we, as a microcosm of the whole, go to battle with the world, with reality, we always lose, first of all, right? But we don't expand and integrate, right? And so to move closer to God, we have to move closer towards including more of the possibility field, more of the actuality, more of the probability field, more of all sides of all polarity, right? Pain is not the enemy. Fear of pain is not the enemy. Chronic stupidity might be the enemy, right? Because chronic stupidity creates more pain. Or chronic laziness. We know what to do, but we don't want to feel any pain, but we don't do it, and we feel more pain, right? Pain is not the enemy. Fear of pain is not the enemy. Incompetence, turning away from, resisting, is the enemy of life, is the enemy of growth, is the enemy of becoming closer to God got us all that is. Because the very essence, the very nature of God got us all that is to partner with, is to own, is to be a part of all that is to understand, is to know. How can you know something without being a part of it? You can't. Right? To know something is to be something. Even in just our mind, to know someone, we know what they felt because a part of us relates to it. Right? So to become more, to become all that we could be, to move closer to serving something bigger than ourselves, a spirituality, to move closer to becoming a bigger microcosm of God, We have to embrace more, know more, feel more, see more, and learn to do so in a way that creates more fun and more success.